Hi, this is Abdul Karim from Khaleej Times, and we're looking at the biggest international stories of the decade. It started off on a note of civil disobedience, with many taking to the streets to call for a regime change, while it also ends with uprising in the Arab world stretching to India and Hong Kong. So let's do a quick recap. The Arab Spring of 2011 gave way to bloodletting in Syria, a refugee exodus, and surging militant violence. Obama gave way to Trump, the United Kingdom chose to Brexit, and for many around the world, the 2010s began with hope for a more equitable world. They end with a slide towards nationalistic populism. The following is a look at some of the people and events that shaped the past decade. The United States will begin the 2020s with Donald Trump in the Oval Office. As the president of a country riven by political, societal and economic discord and a leader facing impeachment. Trump, who is a climate change skeptic, a protectionist and tough on immigration, has eschewed tradition and run the White House his way, taking no prisoners. As the 2010s draw to a close, the booming success of the American economy will help his chances at re-election next year. Let's move on to Arab Spring. After the decade began with the hope of the Arab Spring, it ends with strongmen back in power in several countries. On 14th of January 2011, Tunisian dictator Zain al-Abidine Ben Ali was chased from office by a popular rebellion. The Arab Spring erupted in the Middle East and North Africa. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi was toppled the same year in a NATO-backed uprising. In Egypt, the protests in Cairo's Tahrir Square spelled the end of Hosni Mubarak's reign, but the country entered the decade in the iron grip of General-turned-President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. The fate of millions of people would be changed in Syria. A protest movement against the ruling Assad family descended into a bloody crackdown and eventually a brutal civil war. In the 8 years of conflict since early 2011, more than 370,000 people have been killed and millions have been displaced from their homes, and the conflict has gone global. Russia intervened on behalf of Bashar al-Assad. The Turkey moved to prevent the Kurds from setting up a stronghold on the border. The West built a coalition to defeat the caliphate of the Daesh group, an extremist group that profited from the chaos to claim a vast territory in Syria and Iraq. The organization would eclipse Al-Qaeda and unleash a new torrent of violence, taking several forms. But the US, the Kurdish allies and European nations together seized back the Daesh Caliphate, which was declared eliminated in March that year. Let's look at terror attacks now. On November 13, 2015, a Belgium-based cell run from Syria descended on Paris, killing 130 people in bombings and shootings at a concert hall, bars, restaurants and the Stade de France sports stadium. At the Bataclan, a fabled Paris concert venue, 90 people died at a show by American group Eagles of Death Metal. France, Belgium, Denmark and Britain all fell victim to militant attacks in the course of the decade. The movement swept through Africa's vast Sahel region and parts of Asia. Up next, we'll talk about the migrant crisis. The Syrian conflict resulted in the export of violence, but also in an immense human tragedy on Europe's doorstep, as millions left their homes in search of security and a better life. The crisis crossed Europe in giant processions, ending up in whichever country would welcome them with open arms. Hundreds of thousands of Syrians would end up in Germany. In the Mediterranean, desperate migrants made the journey through North Africa to the sea, using rickety boats and rafts to try to get to Europe. Many did not survive. In the US, Trump made the fight against migrants illegally entering the country from Mexico one of his signature political issues. Another key factor in this decade was political movements. Trump's rise emboldened a surging wave of populist and far-right political movements, from Hungary's Viktor Orbán to Italy's Matteo Salvini and Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro. In Britain, a historic 2016 referendum in which voters opted to leave the EU promised to change the complexion of the continent. After a tiresome process, Prime Minister Boris Johnson seems on his way to leading the UK out of the bloc after the election win. Climate change was another big talking point. As 2019 comes to an end, one Swedish teenager has rewritten the rules about activism and awakened public consciousness about the fight against climate change.
But even though the intentions may be good, this is not leadership. This is not leading. This is misleading.
Millions of young people see themselves in 16-year-old Greta Thunberg and think their elders have sacrificed the planet on the altar of economic growth and creature comforts. Up next is the US-China trade war. On the back of skyrocketing growth, China became the world's #2 economy in 2010, surpassing Japan and only trailing the United States. The World's Workshop has brandished its military ambitions and is positioning itself as a strategic rival to Washington. In the middle of the decade, China staked a claim in the technology sector, working to become a world leader in robotics, information tech, and clean energy. Beijing is trying to change gears. It no longer is satisfied with being home to the factories that produce the world's consumer goods. America has sensed that its supremacy could be contested, and under Trump, that concern erupted in the open. The Republican leader launched a trade war with China, accusing it of rampant intellectual property theft. And even if the two countries just signed a Phase 1 trade deal, their arm wrestling is sure to define the next decade. So this was the decade of 2010s. If there are any particular events that stand out or you think are the defining moments of the decade, then let us know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. It's goodbye for now.